Welcome to Global Connections on ThinkTech Hawaii. I'm your host, Jay Fidell. Today we'll talk about Meddling Macron, his unnecessary maneuvers. Our guest for the show is Dr. Roopmati Khandekar, geopolitical analyst. Welcome to the show, Roopmati.
Hello, Ajay. Thank you for having me on your show. A really pleasure to be with you.
Yes, and the same. As a veto-wielding power at the United Nations, a key nation in the European Union and in NATO, France needs to play a balanced and sensible role. Simply just superficial politics is a sure sign of a weak leader. And also, Macron's appeasement politics keeps up his mediocrity factor. So we ought to examine that. We ought to figure out why he's doing, what he hopes to achieve, and what he doesn't achieve in his efforts. So, Roopmati, tell us what's going on with him. He's taking on what he thinks is a pan-European, if not a global role. Why, and is it working?
Yeah, Jay. So now Immanuel Macron is meddling in international politics, literally, because he's not getting any concrete decisions done out of him. And so we'll run back a little bit and put a brief history about him, that he was actually a French banker and then a politician who was elected as a president in 2017. And he was France's youngest head of state since Napoleon I. And after re-election in 2022, he was the first French president in almost 2 decades to win a second term. So his accolades seem to be very nice. And as a young leader, he came on the world stage and promised big things. But now let's just focus, for the sake of our program, on 2025 and 2024 onwards, when we see the actual Macron just crumbling away. So Jay, basically, after Trump has taken power, and you have a unstable, decisive transatlantic environment, you see Macron has been strengthening his position, trying to strengthen his position within the European Council. And Jay, he is now, because he is the longest serving leader after Viktor Orban of Hungary, he puts himself forth to come on the prime slot. He visits Trump in one of the first state visits that Trump receives, and he tries to portray himself as the voice of Europe but he's not put his stand decisively for Ukraine. He's just received what Trump has given, flown back to Europe, and then tried to form this emergency meeting of Europe where they scramble for increasing their security budget, trying to make it more than the 2% mandatory NATO security spending. They try to see that they can have a security blanket for Europe, irrespective of the US. So that is a possibility which is not practical, Jay. And we all know that. Jay, his policy is directed towards the Europe of power, or European strategic autonomy. And that's where he falls short, Jay. Because you can't have, Europe is very fragmented. It is not as united as it seems, or as united in its name, that European Union. There is lots of fragments, divisive politics, scramble for supremacy. Because when now, recently see Melanie of Italy go to Trump, she talks of the West being powerful. She is trying to portray herself as the voice of Europe, when in reality, none of these powers have the sole authority to become the voice of Europe. They need to work in a group. It can be France, Italy, and Germany who can work together and form a troika to cover European politics. But singularly, they are not that powerful, Jay. So, and for Macron, this has been one of the worst years, where 4 of his prime ministers ended their tenure, and there's a paralysis in the national government. The government is torn between the center, the left, and the right. You have, and his presidency is likely to end in 2027 if he doesn't bid for the next term. So, Jay, the domestic chaos enables Macron to have an international voice. Now, that is a very thing that the French politics and constitution endow Macron with this power to go outside. And France has been very hawkish against Russia. But Jay, 7 years back, when he came into power, Vladimir Putin was his first guest, state guest. So he's got this seesaw tilt in politics, and you can't see him having a firm stand. You don't know exactly where Macron holds his voice. And the French armed forces have been in a reconstruction since 2017. He has increased his spending. The Munich Security Conference that happened, it showed that there can't be, the US administration is very decisive for Europe. France cannot replace it with the help of this get together of these European nations, Jay. Then he came up with the AI Action Summit, then the Notre Dame opening, and that emergency meeting. So he's becoming an interlocutor for European diplomacy. And Jay, paradoxically, because he's paralyzed internally, he looks outward. And in French politics, there's this term known as consensus. So this implies that the French public does not challenge the president on foreign affairs as long as the president does not challenge the status quo left by Charles de Gaulle. So French foreign policy is anchored in old concepts, and politicians are not tempted to campaign or revise them. So it's like both the left and right, the hot button for campaigning is the domestic politics, for taxes, for the retirement age, not foreign policy. And that's where Macron tries to have autonomy in his foreign policy, and he fails, Jay.
Yes, but why?
Jay, because you can't meddle in things which are outside your domain in international politics, where you are not a party to the conflict. You can't put yourself. If you're a mediator, you will mediate and come out. France wants to play a leading role. They have this colonial mindset that they can still make a difference in conflicts and disputes all over the world. It's over, Jay. Today Saudi will become the mediator because the US wants it to. The US has authority in because they're supporting Israel in the conflict. So there is something at stake. What does France have at stake in the Gaza war? Why did Macron say that stop supply of Israel when Israel was at the peak of fighting Hamas? That was uncalled for. This concept of Macron coming forth and saying that in June he will recognize Palestine as a state, it is unnecessary. The literal word for him is unnecessary. And this is meddling where you're not needed. It's a mind your own business in international politics, and that he doesn't do that. So just undermines French position again and again and again.
There's a word that seems appropriate. It's called showboating. I think he's showboating. He's showboating, for the world, maybe for the U.S. in his own way, for Germany, for Italy, for Viktor Orban. He wants to be a leader of Europe, but he can't be. He's a failed administration. His coalition failed. He will probably not be back in office. And the next time there's an election, which won't be that far off, the conservatives will have him for lunch. So I don't know why he's doing this. If I keep on asking you why, and there must be some political. Either it's ego. We know about ego in this country. It's his ego, or maybe there's some political forces playing. For example, I was telling you about how a substantial part of the body politic in France are the Muslims. And
Yes.
They are very self-aware. They're very politically aware. And they don't agree with anybody about anything. And they're very anti-Semitic. And they're very involved in the government. And maybe they're putting pressure on him. Your thoughts about that? Is he responding to that community, do you think?
That is a definite yes, Jay, because the thing is that immigration has transgressed into being a Muslim fundamentalist appeasement program for European leaders. And that is where they have to uh, indulge in these policies which are away from the normal conservative line that France would have taken. Today, they have to support, see this Gaza thing, they have to support Hamas or Gaza to please these voters. And like we have said throughout our programs, Jay, these people who are in minority, they take the effort to go and vote. So that's why this voter appeasement things come in. The natives or the whites or the Europeans, they are too lazy. They take election day as a holiday. They take it as a day to do household chores or to go for a picnic. The population which has just become new voter, they go and vote for the candidate who is theirs, who will do things for them, who will be pro-migration, who will be who will protect them. That's how Stammer gets an overwhelming majority in UK. And he can pass such laws, like we discussed the last program, to term Hindus as extremists, so to please the Islamist jihadists. So now Scotland is a small country, it passes a law pro Hindu people and bans them from having Hindu phobia. So it's like a tussle that is happening between religious centers. And France is one of the main things because whoever enters Europe, they come with the direction to go to, the destination is UK. And for that, they pass through France, and literally most of them settle down in France because they're comfortable in it. There are neighborhoods which we don't recognize now. There are people who we don't find French people right now. So now Macron has to cater to the next level of population. And Jay, when he does this, he loses the French voice on the international stage.
Yeah. So, it seems counterproductive for him because he's trying to be a leader of France as a member of NATO and the EU. He's trying to, do what we all hope Germany would do, but Germany doesn't seem to be able to do that right now. And so we should discuss, at least for a moment, Roopmati, the comparison between what is happening with Macron in France and what is happening with Merz as with Olaf Scholz in Germany. The right-wing group, Alternatives for Deutschland, AfD, seems to be more powerful all the time. And Germany is therefore politically fragmented, I think. And it's hard to get them together. And what is your comparison between the togetherness of Germany and the togetherness of France these days?
Jay, for Germany and France, the societies are very different, and there is a lot of more intolerance and more less patience in the German society than France. They do not have that much of tolerance for this kind of immigration, and it's getting to them. They're going for the right wings because of the claustrophobia that they're feeling in their own country. And that doesn't happen with France because France has also had a splurge of population which has come from Africa, the Islamic African population. So for them, it has been a more widespread or diverse impact of migration. But for Germany, these pockets which came in, the Palestinians were allowed in, the 1 million Palestinians which were allowed in by Merkel, they cause a lot of frustration among the population. And now when one neighborhood gets affected, a city gets affected, and then you have this kind of getting together, and we don't want this politician because he's allowing these people, that comes forth. And German people are more proactive than the French ones to try to get this right-wing party into power, which has happened with Italy. Italy has cut down its migration by 60%, and they are stopping. They used to have this security for a child. 700 euros security for a child in Italy. And when these migrants came, they came in with the demographic strength of 5 to 6 children. They used to pocket easy money. Melanie has stopped that benefit. And so now it becomes unfeasible for these migrants to come and occupy a place. So when Germany sees this kind of response in Italy, they too want to go for the right wing. And the main reason why this swing towards right wing parties is the woes of immigration.
But the AfD is also pro-Putin. And so you get a fragmentation on what to do about Ukraine. And here's Macron trying to help Ukraine, but not really able to garner support around NATO and around the EU. I am reminded, Roopmati, of a movie a few years ago, and the title of the movie was something like the Pan-European Symphony. It's about a symphony orchestra. Glenn Close, American actress, played in this movie. And the whole story of the movie with the efforts of the musicians who cared about making a pan-European symphony, and how they failed and how they disagreed with everything. They couldn't get together. They couldn't collaborate. And the end and the lesson and the porte-parole of that movie was, Europe just has trouble getting together on things. And I remember that movie because I think it's a true statement then and now that Europe has trouble getting together on things. So, we wondered, we speculated, you and me, after we saw, the Trump pull out and, stop funding NATO and all that. We wondered whether Europe would survive without the U.S. And we asked ourselves whether it could operate and get together and collaborate on Ukraine and other things without the U.S. And I think we're having our answer now. We're having our answer in the AfD in Germany, in Meloni in Italy, and Macron too. Macron is a big part of the story. He thinks he can lead Belle France in terms of making Europe stronger. But query, can he do that? From what you've said so far, he's not able to do that. And even if he were more able, Europe would not necessarily respond to him. He is not seen as the leader of Western Europe. Your thoughts?
Yeah, Jay, you are so point on about this. Because Macron, Jay, underestimated the US contribution to Europe. The US contribution for the security umbrella that it provides to Europe, the money, the monetary input that America gives Europe, the investment that America gives for Europe, the trade also, Jay, it is on uneven terms which favor Europe. So all these things were underestimated. The moment Trump comes up with this idea that he does not want to support Ukraine, what happens? These European leaders just come together, very undiplomatic in action, and they come together and they try to form a small meeting in which Zelensky says he offers the land of Ukraine to form this alliance, totally European alliance for protection of Europe. It doesn't happen so fast. NATO was formed through such a long period to counter Warsaw. There was a superpower behind this NATO. There was a superpower behind Warsaw. So this was the war of the mighty. Now, few they're belittle powers, small powers. They can't come together and form a bloc even to equal that of the US. They have to accept the difference in the hierarchy in international politics. They can't expect these people coming together and having an alliance which will counter or which will serve to be equivalent to NATO. Hasty diplomacy that was. And Macron was the one of them who was leading it. That showed one of his characteristic styles of trying to be a leader, but a folly.
No, but we don't know everything that's going on under the blanket. What I mean by that is you and me, we have examined so many times what Putin does in his hybrid war.
Mm.
Most recently we talked about Stammer and the sabotage of aircraft by the Russians, and so many other things the Russians have done in the UK. They have had a free hand in the UK, essentially, even politically, and as a result, the UK has to deal with them politically and in terms of the relationship of the UK with the rest of Europe. And then, all this tumult in Germany, you wonder how much influence Putin has on AfD, because they do support him. And it could be that he's working the hybrid war against Germany through AfD. Could be. And finally, with regard to, and I think Maloney likes Putin. Certainly, Viktor Orban is one of Putin's best buddies, even though Viktor Orban and Hungary, they're essentially failed states. I saw a podcast with Anne Applebaum where she said, watch out for Hungary. They're one of the poorest, the second poorest country in all of Europe. And that's because of what Orban is doing. So it's not clear that Hungary's going anywhere good. That now we have Macron, the subject of our discussion today. And query, how much effect, how much influence does Putin have on La Belle France? It could be that he's creating a tumult in France too, under the hood, that we don't necessarily see, but that is, affecting Macron, affecting his government, the people around him, and making him do these unnecessary and inexplicable things. So to me, I think we always have to look and see if Putin's fingerprints are on the political moves of the leaders of Europe, because we all know that he would like to see them as a group fail, and it may be that he's achieving that even without appropriate media attention. Your thoughts?
Yeah, Jay, he is a seasoned politician, spy. So he loves to take advantage of these fragmentations in the European Union. And European Union is not bound by, if there's an ideological bond, the bond is more stronger rather than this, which was formed on a monetary coming together, a monetary foundation. So, Jay, Warsaw is formed on the loyalty towards Russia. NATO is formed loyalty towards America. European Union was formed for monetary purposes. Suddenly, they're converting into ideological. They cannot have the ideological fervor. If I can convey that, they cannot have that will to fight Russia, because all of them have separate aims and objectives to cater to. So when the Ukraine war happened, Germany was focused towards its heavy industry supply of oil and gas. They did not bother about the sanctions for Russia. It was Ukraine will help you, but we cannot cut off our supply from Russia. So all these things make a big difference when you're having a war or you're having a conflict. There has to be a united front that has to come in. It can't be so fragmented that one will pitch in and the other one will pull back. So, Jay, for Putin, it's advantage time, because these countries do not have that kind of unity. They do not have that kind of backing each other's decisions. When these countries came together to form an alliance which would rival the NATO, how many countries came? 7. So out of 41, 42 countries, if 7 come in, how will you form an alliance which will equate that of the one which has the US in it? So there's a lot of discrepancy when they come for these maneuvers, Jay. And the diplomacy looks very at its infancy, because it's not seasoned diplomacy. And here you have Putin talking to Trump. That's the kind of give and take in diplomacy that has to be taken if you want to override something. And here there is a bickering going on. There is a tussle straight head-on between Macron and Melanie to become the voice of Europe, Jay.
Trump is the wild card in all of this. I mean, he's a wild card anyway. Yeah. And as Anne Applebaum pointed out on the Bulwark, when you look at Trump's efforts through Witkoff and others who have been his emissaries for these hypothetical peace negotiations, you find, and I agree with her, you find that Trump actually hasn't done anything to bring peace to Ukraine. It's all a charade. And so he's a wild card. And we know that he kind of likes Putin, he sees Putin as his buddy. Yeah. So when you put that in the formula, and so Macron is, supposedly trying to be a leader of Western Europe, he's actually fighting Trump about it. And Trump is more powerful, the US is more powerful. So all of these things militate against a collaborative effort by Europe against Putin and to preserve Ukraine. It's not a happy story at all. But then let me add one other thing for your consideration and comment, and that is that you have a further fragmentation among Europe, of the countries of Europe, because of Trump's efforts to impose tariffs all over Europe. And what he's trying to do, and it's clear from what he says, is he's trying to have different deals with different countries. And we don't know what deal with what country. We don't know what the numbers are. We don't even know how he gets to his numbers. I think it's clear that Trump is not competent to deal with tariffs. But here he is trying to have different deals with different countries in Europe and not dealing with Europe as a whole, as an organization, as NATO, as the EU. He wants to separate and divide them, divide and conquer. That's his style here. And it's not going to go well. It's not going to go well for the US. It's not going to go well for Europe or any country in Europe. So I say to myself, this also stands in the way of a collaborating Europe, either on Ukraine or anything else, on raising money, weapons, and so forth, on coming together in the absence of the American participation. Your thoughts?
Yeah, Jay, after Brexit happened and the UK left, already the European Union became kind of weak. And so you did not have this kind of active countries which would come forth. And like you said rightly, he's trying to compete with the US on matters. And right now it's Trump, so we are not very, we are not backing it well. But the France cannot compare with the US on any terms right now. And this fragmentation, Jay, helps Putin because Putin is a leader who has always played to these, like you said, the divide and rule policy that Trump is putting forth. It helps these countries more. When they wanted to protect Ukraine, Ukraine already needs different things from different countries. And the demand was such that they wanted to come into NATO. And, these countries who said yes, they had a blockage of the voting system, the entry system. So nobody came with an emphatic answer to Ukraine that this would not happen in a hurry. And so Russia does. It gave an excuse to Putin to say that I'm saying not to enter Ukraine, NATO, and so I'm going to attack Ukraine. The European leaders could have come together and said, no, this will take time. Whether you want to take Ukraine, of course, but let it have that space, that time. These lives of the mass graves and would not have happened if Europe had a good diplomatic voice. They lack that. And Macron we perceived Macron to be one of the leaders who would do that. And he has failed miserably on that. Because the statements that he makes are literally absurd. Either they don't involve his country's, it doesn't have anything to do with his country in conflicts. If it does, they're not kind of the central player in the conflicts or the issues, and they want to do everything. At the AI summit also, the AI summit will be a matter of discussion because AI technology itself is at its infancy. But the way he portrayed it, like he was having like, it was more than the United Nations kind of emphatic speech. So it doesn't work like that. What you do should translate into action. That's the sign of a good
Yeah.
leader.
Yeah, and I thought, when I heard about that AI summit he wants to make, Europe is not strong on AI. The US is strong on AI. China is strong on AI, but not Europe. I don't know. He's trying to make $1 out of 15 cents, and it's really not going to work. So, taking all this together, it seems to me that Macron, would like to showboat. He would like to be popular among other countries, but he doesn't have the goods. And unfortunately, this leads to fragmentation. We already have so many elements of fragmentation that we've discussed here today. And the bottom line is that it's not a pretty picture for Europe. So
No.
my question to you is, how is this going to unfold? It sounds like it's not going to do well. It's not going to do well for Ukraine. It's not going to do well for Europe in general, or for NATO or the EU or the European economy in the face of what's happening. And Trump's efforts to damage Europe and to damage global trade are unfolding now. And there's no pushback really from Europe. He will divide and conquer them. Where does that take us? Where does that take the liberal world order? Where does it take Putin? Where does it take the US?
The standard of the European Union to be excluded from the Ukraine talks completely just showed its status in international politics today. That even though it was the most vocal, or it was the second most vociferous supporter for Ukraine, it was left out of the peace talks which happened in Saudi Arabia. Just imagine what kind of a difference a good leader would have made in France today instead of Macron, if he had taken those decisive decisions effectively. It would have been a different Europe that we are looking at. Starmer is gone into this under the pressures of British society, so he keeps away from. He cannot speak against against Gaza or anybody, even if they wanted to help that much. So he's gone out of the picture. But really, France needed a good leader to come out and have these long-term foreign policy decision-making ability, rather than Macron. He's got a short-term impact. He says something and doesn't follow up on it. Like when Israel was being bombarded with the Iranian missiles, on the eve of those, when the Iranian drones, 300 Iranian drones had gone and Jordan had intercepted it. That is the day when Macron gives a statement that you should stop supply of arms to Israel. So does he want Israel to fall under this attack? I mean, it was absurd for a leader to sit across an ocean and talk about Israel being eliminated. So it doesn't speak well of a good leader. And when a leader wants to lead, he has to lead with peace. If he leads in terms of conflict, there's bound to be more conflict. Today, Trump has spent around 90 days trying to solve. It's just made things more complex.
Yeah, not likely that he's going to be able to repair that. So the question I put to you, this is a hard one, is how do the French people feel about this? Do they have a sense of international consciousness? Do they care what happens in Ukraine? Do they care what happens among the nations of the EU and NATO? Or are they more interested in, as in this country, the price of eggs in the supermarket? What do they care about? And is there a chance they're going to rise up against Macron and say something?
No, Jay, the French society is traditionally been focused on the domestic issues, like the taxes. You had these farm protesters who came and threw cow dung at the government buildings. No politician comes and questions Macron publicly. They will focus on the domestic issues. There is no, he's the head of the state, he's head of the foreign affairs. He's head of the national security advisor. So he's got a hand which is not questioned by any, and that gives him total autonomy and power in the affairs of international politics. And that's why he makes these mistakes. He doesn't have this set of group which balances or counters his wrong decisions. So what he thinks is right, he says it, and then if they turn out wrong also, he continues with it. No checks and balances system in France, Jay.
Well, at least the U.S. has people that get out every weekend and protest and carry signs around about national and international issues. Well, okay, you haven't made me feel much better about this, Roopmati. Is there a chance that the next time around there'll be a stronger leader, a more effective leader in La Belle France, or will the factors that you and I have discussed will just lead to more of the same, just like we have from Macron?
Yeah, Jay, I hope we get a good leader in France, because we like France overall as a good European nation to keep up the Europeanness. So if it falls, we have the fall of Europe. We don't want that to happen.
Yeah, I keep thinking, am I ready to go back to France? I spent most of my college years studying French and French literature.
Wow.
And I have a very soft spot for France, but right now I'm not so sure I like what's happening. Maybe later, maybe we can all go back to France later.
Let's go.
Thank you, Roopmati. We'll leave it there. Thank you to our guest, Roopmati Khandekar, geopolitical analyst. I'm Jay Fidell, host of Global Connections. We've been discussing Meddling Macron. Thanks to our viewers for watching. We'll see you again soon for the next one. Aloha.
Hello, Ajay. Thank you so much.